Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the One Order panel, in which a group of distinguished industry experts are going to bring us up to date on just what is happening with the IATA One Order standard. And rather than have me introduce them in turn, I would like to ask each of the panelists just to spend 30 seconds introducing themselves, their organization, and identifying what their interest is in One Order. So if we could start with Mark first. Who are you? What you do?
Yes, thanks, Ian. Hello, everybody. So yeah, my name is Mark McDonald, Director Asia Pacific for Fairlogic's an Excelia Group company now. We were recently acquired a few months ago, and they're in the midst of our integration. I'm based in Hong Kong, as I said. I've been in the Fairlogic side for 2 and a bit years now. I started out in the industry at Cathay Pacific, and I was there for around 7 years in a few roles in sales and distribution technology. My involvement in One Order goes back to those days. I wrote an initial One Order strategy paper, and after that, I co-authored the One Order transition study as a consultant to IATA. And I guess because of my airline side experience, and now obviously on the vendor side with Excelia Group and Fairlogics, pretty passionate about airline distribution and retailing transformation. One Order is really an important part of that journey, and I strongly believe as I guess we remove some of the existing legacy industry setup, we'll see the airline industry using standard retailing processes in the future. So looking forward to the conversation with everybody here.
Yeah, and I think that is going to be a big part of the conversation. If I could ask Stéphane next to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Stéphane Lecourtois. I am a Solution Director at Amadeus. So I'm not new at all about NDC on One Order. So I've been there, and I remember some time with you, Jan, at the beginning of 2015 when we were with Rob as well, trying to start and to launch this One Order initiative. So we are quite passionate, Amadeus, about One Order and more globally, quite aligned with Mark on this need of transformation toward retails, simplification of the business. In this time with COVID, we believe it's even more important, and we are doing our best to support airlines and to concretely go ahead in this implementation of those new retail practices. So quite passionate about One Order and a strong, let's say, background on this industry topic.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. And then Rob in Dubai.
Hi, I'm Rob Rohrer. I joined JR Technologies recently from Emirates, where I've been for many years, and I used to be the chairman of the IATA Simplified Business Program, which created One Order. So I've been involved from day one of incubation of this thing, and I'm very passionate that One Order is the future of retailing for the airlines, and that we need to move from the old-fashioned business model to the future. And as JR Technology, we're designing the future and working back that it works with the past. And we are very happy to be a part of this panel.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And then last and absolutely not least, we have Baz. If you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ian. I'm Baz Niemann, part of the global travel practice of Accenture, focusing on aviation, especially digital commerce in travel. I've been involved also in digital commerce distribution, e-commerce for airlines on the airline and on the provider side. And like I think all the gentlemen here in the call, also being part of the, I think it was called Customer Order Transformation, or the really start of the initiative of IATA. So also as Accenture, we try to combine, let's say, what we have as transformational practices from other industries and bring that into aviation, order management being one of the key areas.
Okay, thanks very much, Baz. Thank you to all of the panelists. I'd like to start off by thinking about what are the industry's objectives for One Order. Since it was introduced in 2016, the world has changed quite a bit. Obviously, we're now living in very, very unusual times. But even without that, the world evolves, the industry evolves. And I wonder if the objectives of One Order are the same now as they were when they were introduced in 2016. And I wonder if maybe Mark could pick that one up first and see what we think.
Yeah, thanks again, Ian. So I guess first of all, everyone can appreciate COVID is a health pandemic, and whereas of course One Order is a blueprint for airline business transformation through obviously adopting order management processes, systems, and data. So I think, yes, we will expect to see the same objectives and benefits, and as all of the other colleagues on the panel here already mentioned in their introductions, there's probably even going to be more benefit for airlines as they transform due to the changes in the industry as we come out of COVID. It actually presents unprecedented opportunities. If you think about it, in a near zero booking environment, the risks are lower. And if we actually had a one order solution ready to go, we'd have no cutover issues. Obviously, we're not there yet. And of course, airlines need to prioritize where they are with COVID. And where their priorities are in terms of initiatives and where one order fits into those priorities. But I think as we see on the Farelogix Excelia side, we're seeing many airlines accelerating their discussion, exploring one order and other transformation areas such as dynamic offers more seriously. The second thing I want to talk about is the fact that for those in the industry, and even for travelers out there, it doesn't take a rocket scientist really to understand we need to move away from current, the processes and data. They're out of date, inefficient, and in many cases error prone, and clearly not fit for purpose. I mean, when I was on the airline side, and you can just imagine the big travelers out there wanting extra legroom, they have to call the call center or maybe at the airport to hopefully get their extra legroom seat. And it's not easy, even in single vendor solution environments, to quickly enable extra legroom seat sales on their IBEs. And this is a lot to do with this is obviously the underlying systems, processes, and data. It's really simply old with the way that the PNR, the ticket, and the other data elements need to be synchronized between the various systems. And it makes it very difficult to implement, even for the leading solutions in the marketplace. And so one order will allow that to be transformed. Another example would be the call center wait times that we had during the early days in COVID in March when countries were shutting down. I mean, there was 10, 12-hour call wait times. Understand that many of those were maybe necessary calls to the call center, but the reality is there should be a lot more self-service capability for consumers out there. And I think if we reduce the amount of synchronization between all of the records and move to a unified order record that contained all the information required to make that change, then I think you'd find a lot more, obviously increased in customer satisfaction, but obviously a lot more opportunities for the airline to market and propose new other ancillary offers and otherwise to the customers. So I don't know. I know I'm probably on the clock here in terms of timing, but I think just to summarize that there may even be greater benefits of one order now. There's a hidden cost of supporting inefficient processes that is kind of laid bare by COVID. And airlines must do three things. They have to speed up time to market for launch of new ancillaries, and they have to account for them. They need to reduce and remove cost of inefficiencies. And of course, they need to improve customer experience caused by a lot of these manual processes. So I would sort of finish off in saying, one order is not a nice to have. It's essential for the future of the industry, and it's here with us, and great to have the other panelists supporting its future too.
Okay. Does anybody else on the panel dissent from that view? Are there any other thoughts on that? There are nods going on. So let's just move on then and think about the actual state of deployment of one order today. Now, I know we've asked for a poll of the conference attendees from the airline representatives to see just where they're up to with one order and where they expect to be in the near future. But maybe Stefan, as a representative of one of the biggest organizations in airline distribution, the biggest, I should imagine, maybe you could comment on what is the actual state of one order deployment now? We know there have been POCs, but what about production deployments?
Thanks, Ian, for the question. So indeed, the state of one order. So it is true to say that we are still at the beginning of the journey. We've been working since IATA. So the first meeting was 2015. We have seen several proof of concept in the past by different providers. So we did some, other providers did as well. But a first point to mention is we have already seen proof of concept in production. So it means that we are not waiting to go in production for some stuff. I think the standards already enables to test some use case, to validate some concept in a production environment. So now that's quite important to say. So at Amadeus, for example, we had 3 of those proof of concept. So we did them various collaboration with our partner. So it's very important to work with partner because it's not only technology, it's as well business process changes. So we need to collaborate a lot. So we do those with Shareways, with Singapore, with Vueling and Scoot. So it was very important to involve those airlines. And we get some very interesting learnings from those pilots. So the learnings which help us to define what is the way forward. So the few learnings which I like to share is the first one is related to this one order messages of flows. So we've been working with IATA since several years now. It's not fully finalized. We know it. Still, we have some task force ongoing to finalize the stuff. But still, we have a solid base and we can go in production when we can start the transformation. So it's very important to mention that the standard today allows that transformation. A second very important learning is really on the way we can implement. So what do we have to do to go next to move ahead with that transformation? So maybe my colleague will disagree, but I don't think so, that a big bang approach is not really the way forward. So what we need for our line is really to go with on the different axes that Mark mentioned. So we have some stuff to do in the simplification of selling, in selling more dynamic offer, in improving servicing, doing more sales services, managing better distribution processes, implement new partnership model with more supplier. So there is plenty of axes, plenty of use case that we need to implement, and we need to go really with a step-by-step approach, with a value-driven approach in a way which is in line with the business continuity, with a seamless operation. Airlines, they cannot disrupt too much their way of operating. They have to continue to take care of all the processes they do. So the transition is very important. So that's the second learning of the pilots, which are quite important for us. And the third learning is the fact that the transformation is not driven by the technology. So what we're talking about is really a business transformation toward more retails, and we need to have those different elements together to ensure that we can go to the next step. So quite concretely, if we think about the next step of the what do we need, I think we need technology, we need collaboration, and we need plans. So in the technology, for example, in Amadeus, we have created the technological foundation. So we have an open platform with offer and order management at the core, which is fully integrated in the PSS world to support the transition. So we are ready to implement gradually those use cases. The collaboration as well is very important because this move to retail is a big transformation. It's about technology, the business process changes, sometimes change as well in the airline organization. You have to manage as well your ecosystem, which is a big one. So it's something that we have to do with partner in that perspective. So we are working with Accenture to see how we can bring the new processes and capability to the market. So the collaboration with partner, with airline is a very important point. And the last thing, what do we need? So we need a plan. It's really a call to action. So we have all those use cases. So Mark mentioned already that they are even more relevant after the COVID. So we need to work on those axes with airlines to create these step-by-step, these gradual deliveries on step-by-step implement the transformation. And that's what we want to support at Amadeus.
Okay, thank you. That's a very comprehensive answer. Any of the other vendor companies able to share with us imminent deployments to production, or are we still in that kind of phase that Stefan describes?
At JR, we actually had a production deployment for a short period with Inselware in Curacao. Unfortunately, they were dependent on Venezuela and the airline went bust. But so we had a temporary deployment in production, but no longer at the moment. But we're talking to some.
I was just going to say I knew Inselware very well, and they were very, very forward thinking in some of these things, and their troubles are very unfortunate. Mark, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I was just going to comment that we have a one order use case in production. There's no market news about it yet, but it's imminent. So we do have our first, and this is on the revenue accounting side, no use case in the revenue accounting space.
Very good. So watch this space. So
watch this space.
Rob, I want to put this question to you because I know in your position as chairman of Simplifying the Business, you were very much involved in this. Do we actually need a standard? I think we're all agreed that we need to change the way we work, but do we need a rigid standard to enable us to accomplish that?
I would say yes, we do, because to take as an example, with the airline where the standards came later compared to the action is codeshares, and we have 4 standards for codeshares, because we had 4 independent groups of airlines together creating standards, and then finally IATA got onto it, and we ended up in 4 standards. So the industry is so integrated, and we all work together. So it would be very difficult to sell over multiple airlines, multiple alliances, working with airports, working with governments, if you don't actually have a common standard to work from. If we all start developing what we do on our own, then how do you hand over a passenger from one airline to the other? How does a travel agent sells something on one airline in a different standard compared to another airline? It's just not practically focusing. So I think a standard is given. We need to keep it as simple as possible, but unless you actually do have a standard, I think you'll become a complete mess. And that we'll find for a company like Google, which is their own standards. But within the industry, we have all the airlines and airports and governments and travel agents and ground handlers who work together. And if we don't do this in a common way with standards, it's not going to work.
Okay, and that would be very much the view of the people in IATA who are working on this now. And I guess to sort of paraphrase, getting to the standard might take some time and be a bit painful, but it's a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah, I think the challenge, the airlines were actually the #1 in e-commerce already in the 1960s and 70s. And we're still working more or less the same way. So we need to find a way to get to a new standard.
Yeah, I smile at that because you and I were both there. Okay, so the last question really that I had prepared for the panel, and I'm going to ask Baz to lead on the response to this, is how will the new opportunities that the one order standard brings enable the airline to kick on now as we come out, hopefully, of the pandemic slowdown? Where are the opportunities brought about by this new standard?
Yeah, so I think what we have already heard quite a lot in the responses to the other questions, especially from Mark, looking at ancillaries, customer experience, the financial impact, so all those processes. Also, Rob explaining that airlines were the first in e-commerce, definitely yes, but then also the standard of PNRs, all the existing standards are really closely coupled with the technology, right? So that also leads us to a situation where it would have been great if one order was already implemented, let's say pre-COVID. Also looking at the simplification one order promises, right? So it's not really, let's say, the business process changes inherit from one order, but really to say, okay, what can help? So if you take the most obvious business process, order management by itself, of course, in the PNRs today, there's already very strict ways to manage an order, manage a transaction. The order management, I think the simplification of the moving away from PNR and e-ticket would have greatly helped in, for example, managing the canceled flights, also the financial implications of that, right? And I think in this uncertainty, the situation that we have today, flexibility is needed. So also combined with the customer behavior that has been changing from almost one day to the other with the impact of the pandemic, focusing on self-service and contactless travel, right? So airlines were looking at that, trying to implement initiatives on that. I think one order as a standard, the simplification through order management, making order change, fulfillment easier, would have helped a great deal also with the consequences of the pandemic. I think another business process, if you can call it like that, maybe it's a group, it was already touched briefly by Stefan and Mark, is offer management, right? So really also the acceleration of NDC through the pandemic. We see in other industries a move to digital direct, changing distribution models in other industries. But you see, of course, in the offer management, there is quite some flexibility through NDC, still based on PNR. So it would have been great if it would have been a combination of offer management based on NDC and order management based on one order, also to manage the consequences of the pandemic. So really in the fulfillment, the changes, maybe also in building up after, let's say, in the reconstruction phase, when retargeting customers, right? So retargeting, if you have the data available coming from one order, single source of truth, also the retargeting becomes way easier than using the PNRs and the existing data set. So, and then I think the third one would have been also data. So really leveraging the data that you will get from this centralized order, from also putting in place the analytics around that. That's something that would have also helped a great deal in recovering, or at least minimizing the impact. Is it really, the approach? So will one order solve everything? I think what we also, and Stefan mentioned that also from a transformational point of view, there are a lot of enablers. I lifted out the data. There's also the digital component of that. So it's really, airlines have to manage the uncertainty and can leverage some of the capabilities already from today.
Okay, thanks very much, Baz. And that's really neatly brought the discussion around almost in a full circle, because Mark called out the advantages of efficiency and flexibility in his response to the first question, and you're kind of confirming that will be instrumental in getting the industry out of its current slump. We've come to the end of the time allocated for just us to talk. We're going to open up to questions from the audience in just a moment. So in the meantime, thank you very much, panelists, and we'll look out for the audience questions. Thank you all. So here we are live. For the avoidance of any doubt, what you've just seen was recorded last week, but we have all the panelists live in their own offices right now. If you have any new questions, please do enter them into the chat forum there. We didn't have any during the recording, so we're going to pick it up from where we left off last week. And what I want to do is just basically go around the room and ask each of the panelists to give a summary of where we stand now with one order and where we're going next. And I'm going to go clockwise round as they appear on my screen. So that means, Mark, you're up first.
Thanks, Ian, and hello, everyone. And thanks for sitting in on the last 20 minutes of our recorded session. So yeah, I'll kick off and hopefully we can get some questions through. But obviously, Fairlogic's, now that we're a part of Excelia, we clearly eat, sleep, and breathe NDC in one order. They are key central pillars in the Excelia offer to settlement airline technology platform as we come together as two organizations. And we fully share IATA's vision for one order and the industry's vision for one order, and obviously the panelists here to move the industry to order management from legacy systems and processes of today. So on the Excelia side, they bring to the table a lot of experience and leading solutions in revenue accounting for the airline industry, obviously, and aiming to move NDC into the revenue accounting area so that they can be consumed for processing purposes. We actually, as I mentioned, I think in the recording, we went into production with our first one order use case as well. So it's real, and the implementations are in the pipeline. And of course, there's a key change here as well on the revenue accounting side from the industry to go from batch accounting and settlement to near real-time transaction level accounting and settlement. And that's a big thing for, I think, a lot of people in the industry to get their head around. But it's a critical part of the transformation to one order. On the Fairlogic side, we have, we are already really a de facto leader in one order transition, if you like. We already support the old and the new through PNR ticket, but keep an order record at the same time. And of course, now as a part of Excelia, we're building the next generation offer to settlement platform. So, again, as I mentioned in the recording last week, despite the situation for the industry, we're seeing a lot of airlines explore transformation. One order is certainly one of them. It's important, I think, for the future of the industry. And despite these challenging times, it really is exciting times for Excelia Group right now. So yeah, thanks, Ian, and I'll pass it on. Hopefully
Okay,
get some
Mark.
questions.
You can absolutely guarantee that as soon as we start on this, the questions start to flood in. And so I'm just going to give you the questions now, and maybe you could think about these and incorporate them into your answers. So we've got a question about whether we think that medical testing results will be attached to orders in the future. We've got a very ambitious question here saying, please, could you give the business case for one order, which, in 90 seconds will be quite a feat, but think about it a little bit. And then the other question that's coming is, do you think that the COVID pandemic has delayed the take-up of one order? So if you keep those questions in mind as you give your sort of summaries, if I could ask Rob next, you're up.
Yep. So at JR Technologies, we passionately believe that order management is the future. Means we could probably, I would call this the decade of the transformation from the P&R ticket to the orders. And by the end of this decade, hopefully we can actually all say the P&Rs and tickets were nice memories in our lifetime, but they're no longer being in use. Similar to the previous decade was the first decade without paper tickets. We're building our Aerostream platform to do actually that. And just on the question, like on the medical one, that would be a potentially obvious order item, which you can add into an order and then track and see where it's actually been executed. So that's all the kind of things which you can actually, in an order, if you do it properly, you can put all these elements in there and it becomes very easy, trackable, much more compliance checking, all that kind of things is much more straightforward. So yes, we very much believe that order management is the future. It will take time. It's a 5 to 10 year transition, I would say, before the world has gone over. And the business case, it's probably all about efficiency and the ability to sell anything and to be able to seamlessly execute it. We can currently sell through NDC quite a lot of things, but seamlessly executing is a challenge. So order management and one order is the core of JR Technologies, and we believe we are very well positioned to drive that for our customers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. And Stefan, if you could pick up on that, and maybe especially the question about whether the pandemic has slowed things down a bit.
Yes, thank you, Ian. So on the pandemic, or maybe before the pandemic, I think it's fair to say that I'm fully in line with Mark and Rob. I think we strongly believe that offer an order as a future. One order is a very powerful concept which will enable this famous retail and commerce transformation. So I think that's very important to say. On the pandemic, I think what is very important to say is that the need of that transformation, so the need of having more retails, better offer, creating values, having some better customer services, having the flexibility to integrate new requirements. So the medical requirements that you should mention is one example where airlines need to have the flexibility to integrate very quickly those kind of things in the system are reinforced. So I think that's clear. Now, indeed, the pace of going to offer order, okay, we'll see. We have seen in the last 2 years a lot of exploration, some proof of concept. It was in production, so basically we validate some concept. As I said in the recording, we have some very good learnings. We are now ready to execute. To complement at the end on the business case, I think the business case, airlines, they have to keep in mind that what we are talking here is not a technology migration. Yes, it's important to move away from P&R tickets to have this new world, which is flexible, which is retail oriented. But what is very important, it's a broader transformation. So airlines, they have to think like retailer. They have to think what are the new products they want to sell, what are the new processes in terms of customer experience, how you seamlessly deliver your product on basically what is your offer or value proposition. On the business case, we'll be driven by those business drivers. We believe in Amadeus that we can implement it with a step-by-step approach, meaning having some gradual deliveries. You implement a use case, you get some values, and then you continue your path. I think we don't believe that we need to invest millions and millions and have a benefit in 5 years time frame. So we need to take the benefits gradually, step by step, and this is how we can build a business case with our airlines. And again, I think it's clear we are all supporters of this initiative. It's a great concept, it's a great opportunity for the industries, and we strongly believe that it creates a lot of values, again, for retail, for customer experience, or to have better operation for airlines. And in Amadeus, indeed, obviously, we support it strongly from the beginning, since 2015. We have the technology foundation. We've built offer order management. We've shown in production proof of concept that it's ready to be deployed, and we are ready to engage now.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. I don't like to be rude, but we've only got a couple more minutes, and we need to let Baz address the questions and maybe also answer the question that's come in. Does one order mean that TCN files will go away? And if you don't want to answer that, I'm sure Rob does. But
so I'll leave that one to Rob, and also maybe looking at business case and what has been said before. Interestingly enough, we talk about one order for quite some time already, and also I think 2 years ago at the conference we presented as Accenture, looking at the value, what it would mean actually implementing one order. Then at that time it was more about the standard and not so much about the simplification and the flexibility. And I think from today, also looking at what has been discussed yesterday and today, I hear a lot of times flexibility, simplicity, and transformation, and in different order. But the thing is that also in the keynote from Sergey, we have heard a lot about taking quick decisions, speed, and looking at the different initiatives airlines can deploy. So I think the fundamental thinking around one order management, as Rob was saying earlier, this is something that we believe in also to support, and also that we still see value can be unlocked. So coming back to the business case question, it has changed a bit from maybe pure product retailing to really looking at how do I care about my customer? How can I incorporate medical information, right? Those kind of things still have value, and even maybe more value than they had before.
Baz, I'm afraid we've run out of our all too short time slot. You did really well to get that in there. And the answer on TCN, yes, they go away when we move to a fully one order world. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you to the audience. And we're done.